You sit by a low, crackling fire inside the mouth of a dark stone cave. Outside, the night is pitch black, cold, and echoing with the distant, terrifying howls of Ice Age predators. Around you sit 12 members of your band. One of them, a hunter with a deep scar across his shoulder, points toward the dark forest beyond the cave mouth. He doesn't just grunt. He doesn't just mimic the roar of a saber-toothed cat. Instead, he shapes his lips, adjusts his tongue against the roof of his mouth, and releases a precise, rhythmic sequence of clicks, guttural vowels, and sharp consonants. To a modern ear, it would sound like a strange, chaotic blend of popping sounds, deep throat clearing, and soft whistles. But to the eyes staring around that fire, those sounds carry instant, crystal clear meaning. He isn't just reacting to the present moment. He is telling a story about yesterday. He is describing a shadow he saw 3 miles away near the river bend. He is warning the tribe about a danger that does not yet exist. In that single moment, humanity crossed an invisible evolutionary chasm. Every other creature on Earth was trapped in the sensory present, limited to screaming in fear, growling in anger, or chirping to signal food. But our ancestors discovered how to take invisible puffs of air, shape them with their throats, and use them to build entire worlds inside another person's mind. Today, we speak roughly 7,000 different languages across the world. We have created complex grammars, codified dictionaries, digital text algorithms, and voice recognition software. We send millions of text messages every second across subsea cables. Yet, despite this overwhelming tide of words, we rarely stop to ask the most fundamental question about our own species. Where did this superpower come from? What did the very first human language actually sound like? And how did a shift in our vocal cords turn a weak, hairless ape into the dominant force on planet Earth? To answer this, we have to travel back over 100,000 years into deep time, long before written history, long before cities, and long before the first word was ever carved into stone. For millions of years, our early ancestors, like Australopithecus and early Homo erectus, communicated much like modern chimpanzees or bonobos. They relied heavily on gestures, body language, facial expressions, and a limited repertoire of emotional vocalizations. If a leopard approached, an early hominid would let out a specific distress call. If they found a fruit tree, they would make a food-associated grunt. These vocalizations were involuntary, hardwired into the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain. When a wild animal gets scared, it doesn't choose to make a sound. Its nervous system forces the sound out. Early hominid communication was fundamentally reactive. It was bound to the immediate environment. You could signal leopard now, but you could not say, I saw a leopard by the lake yesterday, or what if a leopard comes tomorrow? You could not describe a dream. You could not tell a joke. You could not explain how to shape a flint axe step by step. The leap from reactive noise to symbolic language required a double revolution, one in our physical anatomy and one in our genetic code. First came the physical hardware update. If you look at the throat of a chimpanzee, their larynx or voice box is located high up in the neck, right behind the mouth. This structure allows them to breathe and swallow at the same time without choking, but it leaves very little room in the vocal tract to manipulate air. At some point in our evolutionary timeline, human anatomy underwent a dramatic drop. The human larynx descended lower down into the throat. This created a large, flexible acoustic chamber called the pharynx. By dropping the voice box, evolution gave us an extraordinary musical instrument, an anatomical setup capable of producing a vast, nuanced spectrum of distinct vowels and consonants. However, this upgrade came with a terrifying evolutionary cost: choking. By dropping the larynx, the path for food and the path for air crossed over each other. Humans became one of the only mammals on Earth capable of choking to death on their own food. For natural selection to accept such a lethal vulnerability, the survival benefit of speech had to be overwhelmingly massive. Being able to talk was literally worth the risk of dying at the dinner table. Second came the software update inside the brain. Scientists studying genetic history discovered a crucial marker known as the FOXP gene, often dubbed the language gene. FOX plays a vital role in fine-tuning the motor control required for complex speech. It coordinates the rapid, incredibly precise movements of the tongue, lips, and vocal folds, while simultaneously wiring the brain to process syntax and sequential patterns. Around 100,000 to 200,000 years ago, a critical mutation in this gene swept through the population of early Homo sapiens in Africa. Suddenly, our ancestors possessed both the physical instrument to produce complex sounds and the cognitive engine to organize those sounds into symbolic order. So, what did those very first spoken words sound like? If you were to step into a time machine and land in the East African Rift Valley 150,000 years ago, you would not hear primitive grunting, nor would you hear anything resembling modern English, Latin, or Mandarin. Linguists and evolutionary anthropologists who specialize in deep time reconstruction look to the oldest surviving human lineages for clues, specifically the Khoisan languages of southern Africa, spoken by the Hadza and San hunter-gatherers. These languages are famous for their extensive use of click consonants. Clicks are produced by creating a vacuum with the tongue against the teeth, palate, or cheek and releasing it abruptly. They require no airflow from the lungs, meaning they can be produced with minimal physical effort and exceptional acoustic clarity. In a wild hunting environment, click sounds are an evolutionary masterstroke. A heavy vocal grunt carries low-frequency vibrations that scatter birds and alert prey for hundreds of yards. But a crisp, sharp click mimics the natural ambient sounds of the bush, the snapping of a dry twig, the rustle of dry grass, or the peck of a bird. Hunter-gatherers could use click-based proto-languages to coordinate complex tactical maneuvers during a hunt without alerting their prey. Early human language was almost certainly click-heavy, highly tonal, and deeply guttural. It relied on subtle shifts in pitch, rhythmic chest resonance, and sharp dental pops. It was an acoustic language forged directly out of the natural sounds of the wild landscape. Furthermore, proto-language was intimately bound to mimicry, what linguists call onomatopoeia. The first word for a river was likely a fluid, rushing sound made in the back of the throat. The word for a bird was a whistle. The word for wind was a soft, prolonged exhalation. The word for a predator was a low, vibrating throat rasp. Our ancestors didn't just invent abstract words out of nowhere. They sampled the sonic environment around them and organized those natural sounds into a shared cultural dictionary. Now, consider why this linguistic explosion actually happened. Why did we need thousands of words in the first place? The traditional answer was that language evolved for hunting and tool-making. But many anthropologists, including Robin Dunbar, suggest a far more fascinating theory. Language evolved as a replacement for social grooming. In primate societies, social trust and group cohesion are maintained through physical grooming. Monkeys spend hours picking parasites out of each other's fur. This physical touch releases endorphins, lowers stress, and builds political alliances within the troop. But physical grooming has a strict mathematical limit. A monkey can only groom one individual at a time. Because of this, primate group sizes max out at around 50 individuals. If a troop gets any larger, there simply aren't enough hours in the day to groom everyone. Social trust breaks down, and the troop splits apart. As early human bands began to grow, they faced a social crisis. They needed larger groups to defend against predators and rival tribes, but they didn't have the time to physically groom dozens of tribe members. Language solved the scaling problem overnight. Vocal language became vocal grooming. With speech, you didn't have to sit for an hour picking lice off someone to build a relationship. You could talk to 3 or 4 people simultaneously while your hands were busy skinning an animal, sharpening a spear, or gathering roots. You could stroke another person's ego, express empathy, and build trust purely through sound. And with vocal grooming came the single most powerful social tool in human history, gossip. Don't mistake gossip for trivial drama. In an ancient hunter-gatherer tribe, gossip was a vital survival technology. It allowed the band to track reputations without having to witness every action firsthand. Who is trustworthy? Who hoards meat when no one is looking? Who slacks off during the hunt? Who is planning a coup against the group's harmony? Language allowed humanity to map out invisible networks of trust, obligation, and deceit. It allowed small, vulnerable bands of primates to scale up into tightly knit communities of 150 people. The famous Dunbar's number working in absolute synchronization. Beyond social cohesion, language unlocked something even more profound: abstract time travel and the creation of shared mythologies. Without language, your mind is trapped in the immediate present. You experience memory, but you cannot communicate past events to someone who wasn't there. You experience fear of the future, but you cannot coordinate a multi-step plan to avoid it. Syntax, the rules that govern how words are ordered, unlocked cognitive time travel. By adding markers for past and future, early humans could pass down generations of accumulated wisdom in a single evening around the campfire. An elder could explain to a 10-year-old child how to survive a drought that happened 30 years ago, long before the child was born. The young hunter didn't have to touch a poisonous berry to learn it was deadly. He just had to listen to the story of the hunter who ate it a decade earlier. Language transformed human culture into a cumulative archive. Knowledge no longer died when the individual died. It was stored in the collective memory of the tribe, passing from tongue to ear, generation after generation. Even more radically, language gave birth to things that do not exist in the physical world. With words, you can describe something you have never seen. You can combine the concept of a man and the concept of a lion to create a mythic cave painter's guardian spirit. You can invent ancestor gods, sacred territories, moral codes, and tribal identities, as historian Yuval Noah Harari notes. This ability to speak about fiction is what allowed thousands of strangers to cooperate. Wolves can only cooperate with the few wolves they know personally, but humans can cooperate with thousands of total strangers because they both believe in the same invisible story. Whether that story is an ancient tribal spirit, a national flag, a legal contract, or a paper currency, every massive human institution, from ancient empires to modern corporations, is built entirely out of words that describe abstract fictions. The moment we learned to speak, we stopped living purely in the physical environment. We began living inside a universe constructed out of stories. So, how did we get from those intimate, firelit nights of acoustic storytelling to where we are today? About 5,000 years ago, humanity experienced its next major linguistic disruption, writing. In the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, ancient Sumerians began making small wedge-shaped marks on wet clay tablets to track bushels of grain and tax debts. For 300,000 years, language had been ephemeral. It was a living, breathing event, sound waves vibrating through the air, existing for a fraction of a second, requiring two living human beings to stand in close physical proximity. Writing froze language in stone. It separated the message from the messenger. For the first time, a person could speak across centuries, communicating with someone they would never meet. Writing gave rise to empires, written laws, literature, and scientific record-keeping. But it also marked the beginning of a long, slow detachment from the physical, acoustic nature of speech. We began to value the static written word over the living spoken voice. Then came the printing press, the telegraph, the telephone, the radio, and finally, the digital revolution. Today, we are living through the most radical linguistic shift since the invention of speech itself. We carry devices in our pockets capable of transmitting our thoughts instantly across the entire globe. We have generated more text in the last 20 years than humanity produced in the previous 5 millennia. Yet, here lies the ultimate modern irony. We are drowning in words, but we are starving for communication. Our ancient brains evolved language for intimate, high-context, sensory-rich environments. When your ancestors spoke around a campfire, speech was accompanied by a rich tapestry of non-verbal data: the warmth of the fire, the dilated pupils of the speaker, subtle changes in breathing, shared body posture, and microfacial expressions. Your nervous system processed the speech alongside a deep sense of physical safety and community connection. Today, we have stripped language of almost all its physical context. We communicate through brief, flattened strings of text on backlit glass screens. We read tweets, emails, and comments detached from tone, vocal cadence, and facial expression. Without the acoustic warmth of the pharynx, without the subtle signals of physical presence, our ancient limbic brains get confused. We misinterpret intent. We read hostility where none was intended. We react with outrage to abstract text generated by strangers thousands of miles away. We have built a world of infinite connectivity, yet millions of people feel profoundly unheard, misunderstood, and isolated. We spend our days scrolling through algorithmic noise, processing millions of words generated by corporate marketing, political machinery, and artificial intelligence. We have traded the sacred, quiet intimacy of the campfire for an endless, deafening digital Tower of Babel. We forget that language was never meant to be a weapon of endless noise. It was meant to be a bridge across the terrifying darkness of existence. Your ancestors sat in the cold, wet mouth of a cave, listening to the dark wilderness outside. They were small, weak, fragile creatures with no sharp claws, no thick fur, and no massive teeth. By all environmental odds, they should have been wiped out by the harsh realities of the prehistoric world. But they had a secret weapon. They had the ability to look into each other's eyes in the dark, shape their breath into meaningful sound, and say, "You are not alone. I am here. We will face the night together." That was the true power of the first human language. It wasn't just a tool for survival. It was the birth of human empathy. It was the moment we realized that despite the dark, chaotic universe around us, we could build a sanctuary of shared meaning inside each other's minds. So, the next time you put down your glowing screen, step away from the digital noise, look someone in the eyes, and speak to them with your real, living voice. Remember what you are doing. You are not just talking. You are executing an ancient, miraculous evolutionary program. You are reaching back across 300,000 years of deep time, picking up the sacred flame of your ancestors, and using your breath to keep the darkness at bay. If this exploration into our linguistic past gave you a fresh perspective on human connection, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to join our growing community of conscious thinkers. Drop a comment below, sharing your thoughts on how modern technology has changed the way we communicate. Leave a like to help spread this message, and share this video with someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Put down the screen, talk to the people around you, and listen closely to the world. Thank you for watching.